Week 12, we're going to talk about the comparative study worksheet. Essentially, you're copy and pasting this blog post over to your own blog, and we're going to do our deep dive. Just a quick run through of the components. The summary, the directions for each step below are to help us break down this larger project into more bite-sized chunks. Now, even the bites are kind of are pretty big. So, but the idea of compartmentalizing. Student links will be here. We can see what's already published. So you can go and check out what other people are working on. I did that as an intention to help us for collaboration and peer review, but also for inspiration on how people are approaching the project. All 11 steps are listed here, so you can go through that. Guidance for your work. Right here, just a really important thing is that if you're just doing film analysis on film elements, that's not going to do it. We need to actually talk about the stuff behind that. So for instance, talking about cultural relevance and other theoretical components that are part of what make your thesis statement work. We're using films to reinforce that. So that is important for us to think about. Thoroughly read this. We already have this document, but I want you to make sure that this will help. And overview video, you're watching it right now. Cool. And this poster, many students found helpful. This poster as well. It covers the same material I'm talking about in this blog post, and it's just another way to look at it. Whatever works best for you. So I have links for that. Watch Garrett's example again and again so you can kind of get a good feel for the rhythm of how it works. Also take a look at his script. Look at the colors that he put in there, because when you're trying to justify the different elements you're satisfying for the criteria that's being assessed, you can color code where the evidence shows up, and that's going to be really helpful, especially if you use Google Docs to make your script. Another example work, and I have a number of video essays on my school district webpage. You should check this out. There's a number of channels that you could look at, YouTube channels that have incredible video essays that can be very supportive to your work. So, 3 tasks. 1, film focus. We're going to talk about that down below. You pick 2 films for comparison. Just make sure that they are contrasting your time, like not during your time frame, either 20 years earlier, or they're not in your this one's, at least one's not in your geographical area. It's not an American film. That's important. So you have to have one film that is outside your contrast of time or space, and then the other film, again, same thing. It's so you could have an American film that takes place now, then you would have a foreign film, or you'd have another American film that's 20 years earlier. So that's really what that's trying to say. Task 3 is you're going to be combining the components of the selected films and identifying your film focus, and then examining to basically you're making your case for your statement that you're doing. And we'll talk about that in more detail. So what you want to do is set a timer, and if you've already picked some films, that's great, but the idea is set a timer for 10-15 minutes and then write down some films, and then the crucial information we need about those films right down here. And this information is where, this space is where you would put that. Number 2, film focus. Essentially, you're going to dig into one of these categories. So which one of these is most interesting for this particular assignment? Do you want to talk about film genres? Maybe you like Westerns, maybe you like film noir, film movements. If you look at the German Expressionism and horror films, maybe that's something interesting. So you can click on these links and do a deep dive into these and find something specific. And that's what you would do for your film focus. So then you write down some different ideas here that you're thinking about for film focus, okay? So for instance, if it's theory, maybe it's auteur theory. If it's genre, maybe it's horror. So you start with this as your general category, and then you get specific. And then your justification is just like you're really fascinated about it, or you're fascinated about an element of it, like individualism or the psyche or psychology. That's going to help you as you stitch together all the other parts. Cultural context. So we talked about this a little bit earlier in the document. Set a timer, and then you're going to read this and dig in. And the idea is, what elements are we going to be thinking about? Okay, and so you have these particular pieces that you think about when you think about cultural context, and putting in some research about these elements for the film. It's like what was happening historically during that film? Why was it successful in that culture? What other things were happening at that time? And this is going to be really helpful for building a case for your particular statement. Okay, so dig into this at this point. And again, set a timer and write down different things that you can come up with for that. Your research question. So when we talk about, set a timer for this element, and I would say like 15 minutes, and come at this and say, think of 3 different research question possibilities. So we have sections down here, and you think about area of film focus, a topic that is interesting, like it's trying to prove something. You're making a case, that something happens in film and you want to show that that is true, and you do that with the evidence. Film or final decisions. So you make your statement here, your focus, the 2 films you're going to pick, and voila, this is it. This is your topic statement. Now with this, we're going to build the rest of the document. So you should be with the first 4 steps. The 5th step should be able to kind of fall in place. Then we start building our argument. And what you want to do is, again, set a timer for this, go in and brainstorm and think about how you're going to make your major arguments that you need to get evidence for. Okay, 3 to 5. And that's where you'll be looking for evidence in the films that you've chosen, but also looking at research that you'll need for historical and other elements, contextual and cultural components. In 7, now we're looking for evidence, primary. These would be scenes in the films you've chosen. And I put a number of things in here for you to write down. So you have the visuals over here, and you want to write down the timestamps for where they show up in the film, so that when you go to manufacture and put together the actual video, the essay itself, that you won't be hunting around for clips. You'll be able to go right to the particular timestamps to cut out those elements. And then write some notes here about what you're trying to say. What are you trying to prove by us seeing that particular clip? And that's what this section's for. And again, you can add more sections if you'd like to. And here, for secondary sources, that would be anything that's not the actual films themselves. This will be articles, other elements on YouTube, the internet. You're searching for other resources to make your case. And again, cultural context is really important. So you're looking for things to help reinforce why what your declaration is true based on the secondary sources. So you want to get 3 to 5 of those and dig into that. And then this is where we write the initial script out. And if you get to that point, you can start working on it. And what we're doing is everything that's detailed here. And I want you to write down some key things that you want to make sure you get accomplished. So this will be just a rough draft of things that you're going to be covering. And then we actually start writing. This video is important to watch if you're going to use Celtics, because it does all the formatting for you. You need a 2-column AV script format. I made a tutorial to show you how to do that in Google Docs. It's very straightforward. You can also watch this tutorial in Word. I think Celtics is more professional. Google, you're able to share it as a live document, so when people are giving you feedback, they can put comments in there. I promote Google to be the best thing for your draft, and I would start with that because I think that's going to be easier to see progress and get feedback along the way. Lastly, you're putting together the whole film. And this is where you'll take all your clips and start to put the parts together. And this information here will help you remind you of the components and things you need to do. And when you get a draft done, just remember that you're going to need to do some fine tuning and that the draft needs to get reviewed. Save it as an unlisted video or put it in your your Google account, and then share that with some peers for feedback. And we will be using at the bottom here a checklist. You do create a works cited document separate that has your work cited, and make sure you include both the films that your primary films are in there as well. This checklist we will use, these are 4 examples that you could look at if you were really kind of stuck at trying to make a good statement. And here is the rubric. You can check into that. We will be using that for our review. And then the review checklist is just a nice overview. Do we have all the parts? And so when you go through here, you get to that point, and then you're working on the screenplay. and we look for these components, and then we get down to the actual video itself, and we look for these components. And this is to help us give feedback about each element that we have in our final product. And that is your not so short overview video.